The summer of 1916 cast long shadows across Providence, Rhode Island, where the St. Catherine's Home for Wayward Children stood like a monument to forgotten souls. Its red brick facade, weathered by decades of New England storms, harbored secrets that would challenge the very foundation of human understanding. The institution, established in 1847 by the Sisters of Mercy, had served as sanctuary for countless orphan children throughout the Industrial Revolution's most turbulent years. Within those walls, 43 children called the austere dormitories home, their ages ranging from 5 to 16 years. The morning routines echoed through corridors lined with peeling paint and cracked plaster, a testament to the building's advancing age. Sister Margaret O'Brien, the institution's stern matron, maintained order with unwavering discipline and religious devotion that bordered on zealotry. Her daily inspections revealed nothing amiss in the carefully regulated lives of her charges. The orphanage operated on a strict schedule that governed every aspect of the children's existence from dawn until dusk. Morning prayers commenced at 5:30, followed by communal breakfast in the austere dining hall, where silence was mandatory. Educational instruction occupied the morning hours, while afternoon duties included laundry, kitchen work, and maintenance of the facility's extensive grounds. Evening prayers concluded each day before the children retired to their segregated dormitories. Historical records from the Rhode Island State Archives indicate that St. Catherine's maintained an exemplary reputation throughout its operational years. State inspectors consistently praised the facility's cleanliness, educational standards, and moral instruction provided to its vulnerable residents. The orphanage received regular donations from Providence's wealthy merchant families, ensuring adequate food, clothing, and medical care for all children under its protection. No complaints or concerns appeared in official documentation prior to the events of July. The children themselves represented the typical demographics of early 20th century institutional care, primarily consisting of immigrants, offspring, and victims of industrial accidents. Many had lost parents to factory mishaps, tuberculosis, or the various epidemics that periodically swept through Rhode Island's densely populated urban centers. Their backgrounds reflected the harsh realities of working-class life during America's rapid industrialization, when social safety nets remained virtually non-existent for society's most vulnerable members. Sister Margaret's meticulous record-keeping documented each child's arrival, health status, educational progress, and behavioral observations with bureaucratic precision. These ledgers, discovered decades later in the orphanage's basement archives, revealed a woman obsessed with order and control. Every meal consumed, every lesson attended, every infraction committed was noted in her careful handwriting that betrayed no emotion or personal attachment to the children under her care. The building itself bore the architectural hallmarks of mid-19th century institutional design, featuring high ceilings, narrow windows, and long corridors that amplified even the smallest sounds. The structure's 3 floors housed dormitories, classrooms, administrative offices, and communal areas designed to accommodate up to 60 residents. A chapel occupied the building's center, its stained glass windows casting colored shadows across wooden pews, where mandatory services were conducted twice daily. Local Providence residents regarded St. Catherine's with a mixture of respect and unease, acknowledging its charitable mission while maintaining careful distance from its inhabitants. The orphans rarely ventured beyond the institution's iron gates, except for supervised excursions to church or essential errands in the community. This isolation served to protect the children from societal prejudices while simultaneously limiting their exposure to the outside world that many would eventually enter as adults. The summer of 1916 began like countless others before it, with established routines and predictable patterns that had defined life at St. Catherine's for nearly 7 decades. The children tended the vegetable garden that supplied fresh produce for their meals, participated in educational activities designed to prepare them for eventual employment, and observed the religious practices that formed the cornerstone of their daily existence. Nothing in their behavior or circumstances suggested the extraordinary events that would unfold in the weeks to come. Sister Margaret's final entries in the daily log, dated July 15th, recorded normal activities and unremarkable observations about the children's conduct and health. The temperature that day reached 82 degrees Fahrenheit, prompting her to allow extended outdoor time in the orphanage's courtyard. Evening prayers proceeded without incident, and all 43 children were accounted for during the mandatory bedtime inspection that concluded each day. The institution settled into its customary nighttime quiet, with no indication of the mystery that would emerge with the following dawn. Weather records from the Providence Meteorological Station documented clear skies and mild temperatures throughout the preceding week, conditions that would have encouraged normal outdoor activities and routine maintenance of the facility's grounds. The city itself bustled with wartime industrial production, as local factories contributed to the national defense effort while America debated its potential entry into the European conflict. These broader historical circumstances seem to have little direct impact on the isolated world of St. Catherine's Orphanage. The night of July 15th passed without recorded incident, according to official documents and witness statements collected in subsequent investigations. Sister Margaret's quarters, located on the second floor adjacent to the girls' dormitory, remained undisturbed throughout the evening hours. The building's aging wooden floors and walls, which typically creaked and settled with temperature changes, produced no unusual sounds that might have alerted the matron to extraordinary circumstances developing within her domain. Local police records indicate that Providence experienced a relatively quiet evening on July 15th, with only minor infractions reported in the city's crime log. The neighborhood surrounding St. Catherine's, primarily consisting of working-class residences and small businesses, settled into its normal rhythm of family dinners, evening conversations, and early bedtimes necessitated by the demands of industrial employment. No disturbances or unusual activities were observed by residents living near the orphanage. The institution's isolation became more pronounced during evening hours, when the busy sounds of daytime Providence faded into the quiet murmur of residential life. Street lamps cast insufficient light to illuminate the orphanage's grounds completely, leaving shadowy areas where the building's architectural features created pockets of darkness. This natural concealment would later complicate efforts to reconstruct the precise sequence of events that transformed a routine evening into an enduring mystery. Sister Margaret's personal diary, discovered years later, hidden behind a loose floorboard in her room, contained increasingly troubled entries throughout the spring and early summer of 1916. Her handwriting revealed growing concerns about unnamed threats to the children's welfare, though she provided no specific details about the nature of these perceived dangers. The final entry, dated July 14th, mentioned prayers for protection and guidance in facing an unspecified trial that she believed was approaching. The physical evidence available to investigators consisted primarily of the orphanage's official records, architectural plans, and contemporary photographs that documented the facility's appearance during its operational years. These materials painted a picture of institutional life that adhered to the standards and expectations of early 20th century child welfare practices. Nothing in the documentary evidence suggested the extraordinary circumstances that would soon challenge conventional understanding of what transpired within those walls. Contemporary newspaper accounts from Providence's daily publications made no mention of unusual activities or concerns at St. Catherine's during the weeks preceding July 16th. The orphanage maintained its reputation as a well-managed institution that served the community's charitable obligations while keeping its internal affairs appropriately private. This public perception would make the subsequent events all the more shocking to residents who had regarded the facility as a stable and respectable establishment. The children's personal belongings, catalogued in Sister Margaret's inventory records, consisted of simple clothing, basic educational materials, and a few treasured possessions that connected them to their lives before entering institutional care. These modest items represented the sum total of their worldly goods, reflecting the austere conditions that characterized their daily existence. Each child's allocation of space and possessions was carefully regulated to maintain equality and prevent conflicts among the residents. Professional staff at St. Catherine's included Sister Margaret, 2 assistant nuns, a part-time physician, a groundskeeper, and a cook who prepared the institution's meals according to strict budgetary constraints. This small workforce managed the complex daily operations required to house, feed, educate, and supervise 43 children, ranging from toddlers to teenagers. The demanding nature of their responsibilities left little time for activities beyond the essential functions of institutional maintenance and child supervision. Dawn broke over Providence on July 16th with the same pale light that had greeted countless mornings at St. Catherine's home for wayward children. Sister Margaret rose at her customary hour of 5 o'clock, her movements following the precise routine that had governed her life for 12 years. The building's familiar sounds accompanied her preparations, from the settling timber to the distant rumble of early streetcars, beginning their daily routes through the awakening city. Her first duty involved lighting the oil lamps that illuminated the corridors during the early morning hours before natural light penetrated the building's narrow windows. The ritual provided a moment of solitude before the demands of supervising 43 children consumed her attention for the remainder of the day. This morning, however, the silence seemed more profound than usual, lacking the subtle sounds of sleeping children that typically marked the transition between night and dawn. The absence of familiar noises initially registered as a blessing, suggesting that the children were enjoying particularly restful sleep after the previous day's activities. Sister Margaret proceeded with her routine preparation for the morning prayers that would officially commence another day at the orphanage. She arranged her religious texts and reviewed the day's planned activities, noting the need to address a minor plumbing issue in the boys' dormitory and organize the weekly distribution of clean clothing. Her footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as she made her way toward the chapel, where morning prayers would gather the entire household for spiritual reflection and announcements. The building's interior remained cloaked in shadows, with only her lamp providing illumination against the darkness that seemed unusually persistent despite the advancing hour. The quality of silence suggested something beyond the normal quiet of sleeping children. Sister Margaret's initial attempt to rouse the children followed established protocol, beginning with a gentle bell that signaled the end of rest period. The lack of response prompted a second, more insistent summons that should have produced the sounds of awakening bodies and whispered conversations. Instead, the silence deepened, creating an atmosphere that challenged her understanding of normal orphanage operations and suggested circumstances beyond her previous experience. Investigation of the girls. Dormitory revealed empty beds with sheets pulled neat and tight, as though the occupants had never disturbed the carefully arranged bedding. Personal belongings remained in their designated places, showing no signs of hasty departure or struggle. The room appeared exactly as it should during inspection hours, yet completely devoid of the 22 young women who had occupied those beds the previous evening during her mandatory head count. The boys' dormitory presented an identical scene of orderly abandonment, with 21 beds displaying the same undisturbed appearance that suggested supernatural rather than natural explanations. Clothing hung properly in assigned locations, personal items occupied their designated spaces, and nothing indicated the typical chaos that might accompany a group departure. The absence of any disruption to the room's organization defied logical explanation given the number of missing occupants. Sister Margaret's methodical search expanded to include every room, closet, basement chamber, and attic space within the three-story structure. Her calls for the children echoed through empty halls, returning only the hollow sound of her own voice bouncing off plaster walls and wooden floors. The building's familiar creaks and settling sounds seemed amplified in the absence of human voices that typically filled the space during waking hours. The kitchen showed no signs of unauthorized food preparation or consumption that might indicate the children had gathered there during the night hours. Dishes remained clean and properly stored, cooking implements hung in their designated places, and food supplies appeared untouched since the previous evening's meal preparation. Even the breadcrumbs that typically accumulated despite careful cleaning were absent, suggesting no midnight foraging had occurred among the missing occupants. Examination of the building's exterior revealed no obvious points of departure or signs of forced entry that might explain the children's disappearance. Windows remained securely latched from the inside, doors showed no evidence of tampering, and the iron gates that surrounded the property stood closed and locked as Sister Margaret had secured them the previous evening. The absence of footprints, broken vegetation, or other traces suggested that no large group had traversed the orphanage grounds during the night hours. The institution's records provided no clues to explain the unprecedented situation confronting Sister Margaret as she faced the reality of 43 missing children. Her daily logs documented normal activities, routine behavioral observations, and standard administrative notes that revealed nothing unusual in the days and weeks preceding their disappearance. The children's case files contain no information suggesting they might attempt coordinated escape or possess the resources necessary for such an undertaking. Local authorities' initial response reflected skepticism about Sister Margaret's report, given the apparent impossibility of 43 children vanishing simultaneously without leaving physical evidence of their departure. Police Captain Thomas Brennan's preliminary investigation focused on conventional explanations, including the possibility of elaborately planned escape, involvement of outside accomplices, or deliberate concealment of the children by orphanage staff. These rational approaches failed to account for the complete absence of supporting evidence. The Providence Police Department's systematic search expanded beyond the orphanage grounds to encompass surrounding neighborhoods, transportation hubs, and potential hiding places where a large group of children might seek shelter. Officers questioned residents, business owners, and transportation workers about unusual activities during the previous evening and early morning hours. These inquiries produced no witnesses, suspicious activities, or credible sightings that might explain the children's whereabouts or method of departure. Detective William Murphy's forensic examination of the dormitories employed the most advanced investigative techniques available in 1916, including fingerprint analysis and photographic documentation of the scenes. His report documented the absence of signs indicating struggle, hasty departure, or unauthorized entry into the rooms where the children had last been seen. The precision with which beds remained undisturbed suggested either supernatural intervention or an elaborate hoax requiring extraordinary coordination and planning. Medical examination of the empty dormitories by Dr. Harrison Clark, the orphanage's consulting physician, revealed no evidence of illness, contamination, or other health-related factors that might explain the children's simultaneous disappearance. Air quality samples detected no unusual odors or chemical residues that could indicate poisoning, sedation or other medical emergencies. The complete absence of physical evidence challenged conventional medical and scientific understanding of mass disappearances. Sister Margaret's emotional state deteriorated rapidly as the implications of the children's disappearance became apparent to investigating authorities and local community members. Her reputation as a competent administrator came under scrutiny as suspicions arose about her potential involvement in concealing the truth about the missing children. The psychological burden of losing 43 souls under her care manifested in increasingly erratic behavior and religious obsessions that concerned both investigators and church officials. The orphanage's isolation, which had previously protected the children from external dangers and societal prejudices, now complicated efforts to reconstruct their final hours and identify potential witnesses to their disappearance. The building's position on the edge of Providence's residential districts meant that few people regularly observed activities on the grounds or noticed unusual circumstances that might provide clues to the mystery's resolution. Church hierarchy's response to the crisis revealed institutional concerns about public perception and potential liability for the missing children's welfare. Bishop Patrick O'Malley's investigation focused on administrative procedures and Sister Margaret's adherence to established protocols for child supervision and security. His inquiry revealed no violations of church policy or evidence of negligence that might explain the unprecedented situation confronting the diocese. The psychological impact on Providence's community reflected deeper anxieties about child welfare and institutional safety during an era when such facilities represented society's primary response to orphaned and abandoned children. Parents questioned the security of similar institutions, while local officials faced pressure to provide explanations for circumstances that challenged rational understanding. The case represented a fundamental threat to public confidence in established social welfare systems. News media coverage initially focused on conventional theories about the children's disappearance, including organized abduction, planned escape, or administrative cover-up of tragic circumstances. As physical evidence failed to support these explanations, reporting shifted toward more sensational speculation about supernatural causes or elaborate conspiracy theories. The story's national attention brought unwanted scrutiny to Providence's municipal authorities and religious institutions. Contemporary photographs of the empty dormitories captured the eerie quality of spaces designed for human habitation, yet completely devoid of their intended occupants. These images documented the undisturbed condition of beds, personal belongings, and room arrangements that seemed to contradict the natural laws governing physical reality. The visual evidence supported witness testimony about the impossibility of conventional explanations for the children's simultaneous disappearance. The building's architectural features became subjects of intense scrutiny as investigators searched for hidden passages, concealed rooms, or structural modifications that might explain how 43 children could vanish without leaving the facility. Expert examination revealed no secret compartments, underground tunnels, or other features that could accommodate such a large group. The structure's 19th-century construction methods precluded the existence of sophisticated concealment systems. Professional investigators from Boston's Metropolitan Police arrived in Providence 3 days after the initial disappearance report, bringing specialized expertise in missing persons cases and forensic analysis techniques unavailable to local authorities. Detective Inspector James Morrison's reputation for solving seemingly impossible crimes preceded him, though the St. Catherine's case would challenge even his considerable investigative skills and rational approach to criminal mysteries. The investigative team's systematic examination of the orphanage revealed disturbing anomalies that transcended conventional understanding of physical evidence and human behavior patterns. Dust accumulation patterns in the empty dormitories suggested the beds had remained undisturbed for significantly longer than the 3 days since the children's disappearance. The absence of normal wear patterns, scuff marks, and microscopic debris typically associated with human occupancy challenged investigators' assumptions about the timeline of events. Laboratory analysis of fabric samples from the children's bedding detected no traces of human oils, dead skin cells, or other biological material that accumulates naturally during sleep. This absence of microscopic evidence contradicted Sister Margaret's testimony about conducting her routine evening inspection on July 15th, when she claimed to have observed all 43 children in their beds. The scientific findings suggested either deliberate deception or circumstances that defied natural law. Interviewing surviving staff members revealed subtle inconsistencies in their recollections of the days preceding the disappearance, though none could identify specific unusual events or behaviors among the children. Cook Sarah Henderson's testimony described normal meal preparation and consumption patterns, yet kitchen supply inventories indicated food consumption had decreased gradually over the previous month. This discrepancy suggested either administrative error or a reduction in the facility's actual population before the reported disappearance. The groundskeeper's maintenance logs documented routine repairs and landscaping activities throughout early July, with no mention of unusual circumstances or unauthorized access to the property. However, his description of the children's outdoor activities conflicted with weather records that showed several days of rain when he claimed to have supervised garden work. These temporal discrepancies raised questions about the reliability of witness testimony and the accuracy of documented events. Financial records from the Rhode Island State Bureau of Child Welfare revealed irregularities in St. Catherine's funding requests and population reports during the months preceding July 1916. The orphanage had requested reduced meal allowances and clothing budgets while reporting a full complement of 43 children in residence. These administrative inconsistencies suggested either bureaucratic error or deliberate misrepresentation of the facility's actual circumstances. Dr. Luck's medical examination records for the children showed a disturbing pattern of declining health assessments and reduced medication prescriptions during the spring of 1916. His notes mentioned concerns about nutritional deficiencies and increased susceptibility to respiratory infections among the residents. Yet his formal reports to state authorities during the same period documented satisfactory health conditions and no significant medical concerns requiring intervention or additional resources. The building's heating and ventilation systems underwent thorough inspection to identify potential sources of toxic gases or other environmental hazards that might explain simultaneous incapacitation of all residents. Engineers found no evidence of carbon monoxide leaks, gas line failures, or other mechanical problems that could cause mass unconsciousness or death. The facility's infrastructure appeared sound and properly maintained according to contemporary safety standards. Archaeological examination of the orphanage grounds revealed disturbed soil patterns in several locations that suggested recent excavation activities inconsistent with normal landscaping or maintenance work. However, careful excavation of these sites produced no human remains, personal belongings, or other evidence that might explain the children's fate. The soil analysis indicated the disturbances occurred months before the reported disappearance, further complicating the investigative timeline. Telegraph communications with other charitable institutions across New England sought information about unusual adoptions, transfers, or requests for child placement during July 1916. These inquiries produced no leads regarding the missing St. Catherine's residents, despite the distinctive circumstances that should have made such a large group memorable to receiving institutions. The absence of any transfer record suggested the children had not been relocated through official channels. Psychological evaluation of Sister Margaret revealed increasing signs of mental deterioration and religious obsession that called into question her reliability as a witness to the events she described. Her insistence on supernatural explanations for the disappearance conflicted with investigators' commitment to rational analysis and evidence-based conclusions. Yet her detailed knowledge of each child's background and personality seemed inconsistent with fabricated testimony or deliberate deception. The investigation's expansion into surrounding communities produced numerous reports of strange occurrences during the weeks preceding July 16th, including unexplained lights, unusual sounds, and disturbing dreams experienced by residents living near the orphanage. While most investigators dismiss these accounts as superstitious reactions to the publicized disappearance, the consistency of certain details suggested the possibility of actual phenomena that escaped conventional documentation. Comparison with similar cases from American and European archives revealed no precedents for the simultaneous disappearance of such a large number of institutionalized children without leaving physical traces or credible witness accounts. The St. Catherine's case appeared unique in criminal history, challenging established investigative procedures and theoretical frameworks for understanding missing persons incidents. This uniqueness complicated efforts to apply proven investigative techniques to the mystery's resolution. Local newspaper archives provided context for the social and economic conditions affecting Providence's child welfare system during 1916, revealing overcrowding, inadequate funding, and administrative corruption that plagued many charitable institutions. However, St. Catherine's had maintained a reputation for superior management and care compared to similar facilities, making it an unlikely candidate for the systematic neglect or abuse that might motivate mass escape attempts. The Rhode Island Attorney General's office initiated a parallel investigation focused on potential criminal liability and institutional misconduct that might explain the children's disappearance through conventional means. This inquiry examined financial irregularities, staff background checks, and compliance with state regulations governing child welfare institutions. Despite thorough scrutiny, investigators found no evidence of criminal activity or regulatory violations that could account for the missing residents. Expert consultation with alienists and specialists in abnormal psychology sought explanations for the apparent collective behavior that might have preceded the children's disappearance. These professionals noted the rarity of mass hysteria or coordinated action among institutionalized populations, particularly involving subjects of varying ages and developmental stages. The theoretical frameworks available in 1916 provided no adequate models for understanding such phenomena. Physical evidence collection expanded to include microscopic analysis of air samples, water quality testing, and examination of building materials for unusual chemical residues or contamination. These scientific investigations employed the most advanced analytical techniques available to early 20th century forensic science, yet produced no anomalous findings that might explain the circumstances surrounding the children's disappearance. The absence of physical evidence remained the investigation's most puzzling aspect. The case's growing notoriety attracted attention from spiritualists, occult investigators, and other individuals claiming expertise in supernatural phenomena. Though official investigators maintained skeptical attitudes towards such explanations. However, the failure of conventional investigative methods to produce satisfactory results gradually opened some minds to alternative theories about the events at St. Catherine's. This philosophical tension reflected broader cultural conflicts between scientific rationalism and traditional religious beliefs, Documentation of the investigation's progress revealed the systematic elimination of conventional explanations without the emergence of credible alternative theories to explain the children's fate. Each investigative avenue terminated in dead ends that challenged fundamental assumptions about physical reality and human behavior. The accumulation of negative evidence created a more profound mystery than simple disappearance, suggesting circumstances that transcended normal understanding of cause and effect. The investigation's conclusion arrived not through resolution, but through exhaustion of all rational possibilities for explaining the events at St. Catherine's Home for Wayward Children. By September 1916, authorities had pursued every conventional theory, interviewed every potential witness, and analyzed every piece of physical evidence without approaching a satisfactory explanation for the simultaneous disappearance of 43 children. The case file grew to encompass hundreds of pages, documenting dead ends and contradictions. Sister Margaret's final testimony, recorded 3 weeks before her transfer to a psychiatric facility in Boston, contained increasingly incoherent references to divine intervention and spiritual warfare that investigators dismissed as evidence of complete mental breakdown. Her rambling statements about angels and demons provided no useful information about the children's actual fate. Though her intimate knowledge of their individual personalities and backgrounds remained remarkably detailed despite her deteriorating mental condition. The orphanage building stood empty through the autumn months, its windows boarded against vandals and curiosity seekers who sought to explore the site of Providence's most perplexing mystery. The Catholic diocese announced plans to demolish the structure and sell the property, citing the impossibility of resuming operations given the public's association of St. Catherine's with unexplained disappearance. This decision effectively erased the physical evidence that might have provided future investigators with additional clues. Local residents reported continuing strange phenomena in the neighborhood surrounding the abandoned orphanage, including unexplained sounds, moving shadows, and the persistent sensation of being watched by unseen observers. These accounts, while dismissed by authorities as products of overactive imagination and newspaper sensationalism, demonstrated the lasting psychological impact of the unsolved mystery on Providence's community. The building's reputation as a haunted location discouraged potential buyers and urban development. The 43 missing children became subjects of intense speculation and mythologizing as their individual identities merged into collective legend that obscured their actual personalities and circumstances. Newspaper accounts created fictional narratives about their lives that bore little resemblance to the documented facts contained in official records. This transformation from real people into mythical figures reflected society's need to rationalize inexplicable events through storytelling and folklore. Official closure of the investigation in November 1916 acknowledged the authorities' failure to determine the children's fate or identify the circumstances that led to their disappearance. The final report concluded that no evidence supported theories of criminal activity, institutional negligence, or natural disaster that might explain the events. This admission of investigative failure represented an unprecedented acknowledgement of limitations in contemporary law enforcement and scientific understanding. The case files were sealed and deposited in state archives, where they remained classified for decades pending potential future developments that might provide new insights into the mystery. Periodic attempts to reopen the investigation during subsequent years produced no significant discoveries or alternative theories that advanced understanding of the St. Catherine's disappearance. The passage of time only deepened the enigma by eliminating potential witnesses and deteriorating physical evidence. Academic interest in the case emerged during the 1920s as sociologists and criminologists sought to understand the investigation's failure and its implications for institutional child welfare policies. Their analyses focused on administrative procedures, investigative methods, and social conditions that might have contributed to the tragedy. However, these scholarly examinations failed to produce explanations that satisfied scientific standards of evidence and logical consistency. The property where St. Catherine's once stood was eventually sold to private developers who constructed residential housing despite persistent rumors about supernatural activity and cursed ground. New residents reported no unusual experiences, though local folklore continued to associate the location with mysterious disappearances and ghostly manifestations. The physical transformation of the site failed to dispel the psychological legacy of the unsolved mystery. Comparative analysis with other missing persons cases from the early 20th century revealed no similar incidents involving the simultaneous disappearance of large groups without leaving physical traces or credible evidence of their fate. The St. Catherine's case remained unique in criminal archives, defying categorization within established typologies of missing persons investigations. This singularity contributed to its enduring fascination for researchers and amateur investigators. The psychological impact on surviving staff members varied considerably, with some individuals maintaining lifelong silence about their experiences, while others became obsessed with finding explanations for the inexplicable events they witnessed. Cook Sarah Henderson's unpublished memoir, discovered after her death in 1954, contained detailed accounts of supernatural phenomena that preceded the children's disappearance, though the reliability of these claims remained questionable given the traumatic nature of her experiences. Legal proceedings related to the orphanage's closure and property disposition revealed financial irregularities that had escaped earlier investigation, including unauthorized transfers of funds and falsified population reports during the months before the disappearance. These discoveries suggested administrative corruption might have played a role in creating conditions that enabled the tragedy, though they provided no direct evidence about the children's actual fate or the circumstances of their vanishing. The Catholic Church's internal investigation reached conclusions that remained sealed in diocesan archives, though leaked documents suggested ecclesiastical authorities suspected supernatural intervention in the events at St. Catherine's. This position conflicted with the Church's general skepticism toward miraculous claims and its preference for rational explanations of unusual phenomena. The theological implications of the case created internal debates that influenced church policy regarding institutional child care. Spiritualist movements of the 1920s adopted the St. Catherine's children as symbols of innocence victimized by institutional indifference and supernatural malevolence. Though their interpretations bore little resemblance to documented facts about the orphanage's operation or the children's actual circumstances, these mystical explanations provided emotional satisfaction for individuals seeking meaning in inexplicable tragedy, yet contributed nothing to understanding the actual events that occurred in July 1916. The case's influence on child welfare policy extended beyond Rhode Island, as state governments nationwide reviewed security procedures and oversight mechanisms for institutional care facilities. These administrative reforms address theoretical vulnerabilities that might have contributed to the St. Catherine's tragedy, though they could not address circumstances that transcended conventional understanding of institutional management and child protection. The regulatory changes represented symbolic responses to inexplicable events. Historical research conducted during the 1960s attempted to reconstruct the children's individual stories and trace their backgrounds before entering St. Catherine's care, hoping to identify patterns or connections that might explain their collective disappearance. These biographical investigations revealed typical histories of poverty, abandonment, and family tragedy that characterized institutional populations during the early 20th century. No unusual circumstances or common factors emerged from this analysis. The building's demolition in 1968 eliminated the last physical evidence of the St. Catherine's mystery, though archaeological monitoring of the destruction process revealed no hidden chambers, concealed remains, or other discoveries that might have provided closure to the decades-old investigation. The site's transformation into a modern apartment complex marked the final erasure of tangible connections to the unsolved disappearance and its 43 victims. Contemporary reassessment of the case files using modern investigative techniques and psychological profiling methods has produced no breakthrough insights that explain the events of July 1916, though technological advances have eliminated several theoretical possibilities that earlier investigators considered plausible. The fundamental mystery remains intact, despite improvements in forensic science and criminal investigation procedures. The children's fate continues to defy explanation. The legacy of St. Catherine's Home for Wayward Children persists in Providence's collective memory as a reminder of the limitations of human understanding when confronted with circumstances that challenge rational explanation. The 43 missing children represent not merely a criminal mystery, but a philosophical problem that questions the boundaries between possible and impossible, natural and supernatural, explicable and unknowable. Their disappearance stands as testament to the enduring power of mystery in an age of scientific certainty. The silence that settled over the empty dormitories on July 16, 1916, has never been broken by confession, discovery, or revelation that might provide closure to one of America's most perplexing missing persons cases. The questions that tormented investigators 9 decades ago remain unanswered, and the fate of 43 innocent children continues to haunt those who seek rational explanations for inexplicable events. Perhaps some mysteries are destined to remain forever beyond human comprehension, existing as eternal reminders of the limits of knowledge and the persistence of the unknown.